I have 5:30. I'll call to order the study session for the City of Cherry Hills Village City Council. It is 5:30. And we'll start off first item on the agenda. Actually, the only item really on the agenda is an e-bike status update, which I understand will come from our parks coordinator, Ms. Black. You have the floor.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of council. So it's been about a year since City Council and PTRC reviewed the language about motorized vehicles on trails in the code and opted to maintain the status quo. So over the past year, e-bikes have continued to be prohibited on all of our trails in the city. We are providing an update since it has been about a year. It continues to be a hot topic. We're still seeing increased use of our trails through this next COVID year. And neighboring jurisdictions have recently changed some of their legislation as well. So we wanted to provide council with an update. Kind of a roadmap for the study session. I will do a review of e-bikes and e-bike classes since it has been a while since we've talked about it so that we're all on the same page. Go through that update to neighboring jurisdictions legislation, hand it over to Chief to talk about the police perspective, and then get into some related issues that we're seeing on our trails as well, primarily speeding, and some of the things that the Parks Division is doing in response to those. So jumping right in, what are e-bikes? They're electrical assisted bicycles. They are divided into 3 classes under Colorado state law. So Class 1 e-bikes are equipped with a motor that provides assistance only when the rider is pedaling. That assistance cuts off when the speed reaches 20 miles per hour. So these aren't bikes that are going to propel themselves on their own. They're just providing a boost basically when the user is pedaling. Class 2 e-bikes are equipped with a motor that provides assistance regardless of whether the user is pedaling. So you have the option to press a throttle and it would provide you assistance even if you're not pedaling up to 20 miles an hour. And it can also provide you assistance as you're pedaling. Class 3 e-bikes have a motor that helps when you're pedaling, and these reach speeds of 28 miles an hour. For the purposes of our discussion, Class 3 e-bikes aren't permitted anywhere on parks and trails. Under state law, they're limited to public roadways, so they aren't really part of the parks and trails discussion. All 3 of the different classes can be used with the power switched off, basically as a regular standard bicycle. So again, under state law, Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes as of 2017 are classified as bicycles with the same rights as standard bicycles. The law allows Class 1 and 2 e-bikes on bike, pedestrian, or multi-use trails. Class 3 e-bikes are only allowed on public roadways. They're more restricted. Users have to be 16 years of age or older, and you have to be wearing a helmet. The law also does give local governments the authority to allow or prohibit Class 1 and 2 e-bikes on trails. So to review, our municipal code, gas and electric motorized vehicles are prohibited on all of our trails. This is defined specifically enough that that e-bikes are prohibited. There is an exception if they're being used as a mobility device on our trails under the ADA. And I do have the full text of the code, but I'm not going to display it. It is in your packets in the memo. So as a review, what e-bikes look like, they're very hard to tell apart from a standard bike. The batteries are integrated into the frame. If it's Class 1, there won't be a throttle. If it's Class 2, there will be a throttle, but it's pretty small and integrated with the shift levers. And the motor is low profile and incorporated into the wheel. So just for a little bit of fun, I went ahead and pulled 4 on this slide, 4 on the next slide, bikes that are models that are made within the last couple of years. So if you want to take a look at these for a second, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which might be e-bikes. You might guess looking at the 1 because it's kind of electric and flashy and blue, but all of these are actually e-bikes that are on the screen right now. So they're very, very difficult to ID, particularly if it's Class 1. you're just pedaling and getting a boost. It's not propelled on its own. So when they're in motion, it's almost impossible to tell sometimes. For other examples, as interesting and exciting as some of these look, none of these are e-bikes. They're full suspension mountain bikes, fat tire bikes, depth cruiser. So it's really tough in the field to identify who's riding an e-bike and who's not, if they're pedaling or if it's class 1 e-bike, and then that assist is only happening when you're pedaling. So that's enough of an e-bike review. Coming over to legislation changes that have happened since we've last talked about this topic. So Greenwood Village used to prohibit e-bikes on all of their parks and trails. They went through and updated to the 2020 Model Traffic Code. The Model Traffic Code follows state law. You know, it treats Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes as bicycles. So when Greenwood Village adopted the Model Traffic Code, they had the discussion about whether to move forward with that definition and with allowing e-bikes on their trails. And they did decide to do that. So e-bikes are now, as of October, permitted on trails in Greenwood Village. And that was on recommendation too from their Parks Commission. Interestingly, Greenwood Village hadn't had any speed limit on their trails prior to that point. So at the same time they adopted the Model Traffic Code, they instituted a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on their trails to match us in Denver and most neighboring jurisdictions. It's 15 miles an hour. So this is now a visual representation of the Highline Canal at this point. So the only sections that do not allow e-bikes are our section in the center there, and then Waterton Canyon. Aurora is highlighted yellow on this map. Aurora adopted a citywide e-bike policy allowing Class 1 and 2. Their agreement with Denver Water for the Highline is from 1999. The definition of motorized vehicles is restrictive enough that in their agreement with Denver Water, it doesn't allow e-bikes. However, functionally, Denver Water is supportive of them just enforcing their city e-bike policy on the Highline Canal, which is to say, functionally, e-bikes are being allowed on the Highline Canal in Aurora. They are going to be updating that language in their recreational lease agreement with Denver Water this year. Our agreement is also up for renewal this year as well. So it's something a bunch of jurisdictions are going to have to go through. And then Waterton Canyon is the only other exception. It's managed jointly with the U.S. Forest Service and Denver Water, so the Forest Service has very restrictive legislation in place. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sheep.
So, good evening. I tried to anticipate maybe some questions you might have. I can't imagine I've got them all, but just a few things to go over. And I had Commander Weathers come too in case we had some other questions. First, we've had no accidents or injuries related to e-bikes on the Highline for the past 3 years, which is what our records go back to. We have received an occasional call with a complaint of bicycles speeding on the Highline. From the anecdotal information I can give you, when we've had our bicycles up there, two officers in particular will tell you that it's not necessarily e-bikes that people complain about, but it would be speed more than anything. And this is he recently retired, or I would probably had Bob, we called him Bobby Big Wheels because he was up there so much riding the bikes. So the department has worked hard to provide a presence on the canal. We've utilized foot patrols, bicycle units, our motorcycle unit. The code officers drive the canal when they can, and quite frankly, your chief has even been up there doing different things at different times. So we have tried to provide a presence up there as much as we can. While doing that, we try to remain mindful that the rest of the village has different issues to deal with, including a lot of areas where people ask us to do traffic enforcement, other criminal issues that require our attention and things of that nature. So we work really hard to try to prioritize, which is what the entire city does all the time. When do we have people available for the High Line? When do we not? When should we do it? Time of day, all of those types of things. So, and we do obviously react when we get calls for service, without a doubt, getting up there. Maybe just a little bit of perspective that I would like to try to provide. As you can see from the pictures that Emily supplied you, police officers have to work within certain boundaries. You all know this. We have to have reasons to stop people. And obviously, when you look at these pictures, you cannot identify what an e-bike is. Maybe when they were first building them, you know, that center pipe on there, you could really see that. That's just not possible anymore. They've also become sophisticated enough, like she showed you on these pictures, that even the ones that we're using, you have a first button, a second button, and a third button, right? And you can be pedaling as you're moving about. And unless, quite frankly, your feet are off the pedals and you're doing a speed which is not possible to be doing without pedaling, that's how you might be able to identify an e-bike. But it is very difficult. I don't mean to make light of it because of that, but you can see what we would have to do to try to identify that. We also have issues that Catherine was very good to point out. We've got some information about ADA issues with regard to certain people who ride e-bikes because they need to. Because they might have some disability or something around that. So again, it's a matter of how you stop people and why. And then quite frankly, when all the neighboring jurisdictions are allowing e-bikes, it's really, I think it will be not impossible, but hard to tell people that you have to dismount or stop or walk or just manually use your bike in a way that we would promote here in the village. So those are some of the things that I thought you might ask about. I'm sure there'll be other questions when the presentation is over, but if I had to sum things up with regard to just bicycles in general on the High Line or trails or wherever, I see more of a speed issue. If you asked me to supply you statistical data to agree with that, I can't do it. But this is from the officers who are out there all the time. The commander obviously is connected to them more closely than I am, and this is probably the biggest issue we would see on the High Line with regard to this issue.
And just echoing what the chief said, this is something that I wanted to touch on from a parks perspective too, is speed, because this is the primary complaint that we hear from folks out on the trail. So I did want to cover with council some of the things that we're doing as the Parks Division to address that issue and make sure that we're making it as safe as possible for people. So additional signage is coming soon on the Highline Canal. I know I've been saying that for about a year as we go through supply chain issues and everything with the Conservancy, but we will be getting more signs along the Highline Canal, hopefully in the next few months, that go over trail rules, speed limits, that type of thing, and just general wayfinding. We also are ordering additional signs in-house for the entrances at Bellevue and Hamden that contain not just the no e-bikes language, but a little bit more of the specific code language that the city attorney was nice enough to help us with to be able to very clearly communicate that to people, along with additional speed limit signs that we're also putting on the Highline and our bridle trails as part of the trail renaming process with PTRC. We are also continuing the Share the Trail campaign that the Conservancy started last year. We're continuing to do outreach both on our social media and in the Village Crier, talking about trail etiquette, that there is a speed limit, alerting when passing, which is another big one that folks get startled, or horses or dogs get startled because cyclists come up behind them quickly. So really just continuing to try and educate people about the speed limit and about trail etiquette. And then two possibilities we're also analyzing. The first would be flashing speed signs that are specific for bicycles that we would be able to place along the High Line in different locations, again, to raise that level of awareness for folks. So this is something that we're exploring a little bit more in the second master plan survey that will be coming out. So we'll be asking the community about how they feel about that. And then another one that we've started to look into are these offset gates that you see on the screen. These really slow all trail users, if, depending on how they're placed, cyclists would have to dismount to get through these. And these we would particularly be looking at closer to road intersections on the High Line. So Quincy and Colorado, to try and slow the bicycle traffic down. And that's something that we've been looking into. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilor Plum?
Excuse me. The mayor and I attended an HOA meeting, I believe it was last summer, and one of the issues they raised was speeding e-bikes. But from my understanding now, the bigger problem is really just the speeders, whether it's on a regular bike versus an e-bike. And these e-bikes, the fastest they go, unless they can pedal faster, is 20 miles an hour on the 1 and 2. Is that right?
Yes, so the assist cuts off at 20 miles an hour. So if you can get it going faster than that, you can continue. But at that point, I mean, there are also road bikes that could top 20 miles an hour. So at that point, it is more of a question of the user than the bicycle.
So it really seems to me that the real issue is not e-bikes versus regular bikes. It's really the speeding. Basically, we're hearing that, which is the way it was. My understanding last summer when we talked to some of these people. So that's my only comment.
The image that you put up with the 71 miles of High Line, we've got a chunk 3 miles through Cherry Hills that's shown up in red, and then Waterton Canyon at the beginning of the trail or the canal. I'm curious, that is obviously just for Class 3 then, right? The red?
No, that's Class 1 and 2. So no jurisdiction allows Class 3 e-bikes anywhere on the trail or on any trail.
And the rest of it is available for 1 and 2, except when you get to the red?
That's correct.
Do we get a bunch of complaints from our citizens, or any from our citizens for that matter, about having to dismount or go around? Or I'm just curious, what does this mean for somebody who wants to go get on and do a 30-mile ride?
We in the Parks Division don't get complaints. I think that functionally what people do is just continue.
Is what?
Anyway,
They just keep
it's
going.
just continue past
Yeah.
the signs.
Okay.
Not complaining, just sort of like,
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Emily, and I think Chief, you both talked about communication. And, when you look at it, I spent a fair amount of time on the High Line yelling at people, please, say something, please, announce yourself. And doing each run, I'll do stats, right? I had this many bikers come up from behind me, and overwhelmingly, they don't communicate. So I give them a little heads up as they're screaming past. And I think the issue is partly it's bikes, but it's also, I think it's a greater issue in terms of walkers who don't pay attention, who've got dogs that are drifting out, who have kids that are drifting out. To me, this thing is about safety, and it's not. You can't point a finger at bikers or at e-bikes. You can't point a finger at any one classification, because we're all out there using it together. And are there jurisdictions that have addressed communication and addressed announcing and building that into their code with some kind of punitive stance that when people are, it's not that they are not aware of it. I guarantee you they're aware of it. It's laziness and not being willing to either put a bell on their bike or just say something. But are there any jurisdictions out there that are addressing the communication?
I don't know of any that have actually put something in writing in their code with a penalty. I do know that, especially along the Highline Canal, all of us are jurisdictions are making an effort to get that message out there. The signs that are going in along the High Line, not just in our jurisdiction, the length of the 71 miles, have that on the rule signs, but also just as sort of a little shout out on some of the wayfinding signs, because it is such a safety issue and because it is important to really try to establish that norm of you need to speak up when you're passing. I know some jurisdictions have partnered with bike shops in their jurisdiction to give out bike bells as a free promotion, basically, on regional trails. Again, to just try and get the resources out there that you should use a bell. If you're not going to say on your left, you need to do something. So those are the efforts that I'm familiar with, but I don't know about actually putting it in the code. I haven't heard of anyone doing that.
When do you think it is appropriate, given that we are only one of two? It's like our internet tax code. We in the North Pole stand out there alone. When do you think it's going to be appropriate to change to address these two red lines? I mean, and the reality is, we know practically people at Dan's point, they're going to take a 30-mile ride. They're not going to slow down when they go through our 3 miles. We know that. So when it seems like sooner rather than later, we should probably address this and square up with the rest of our communities along these 70 miles.
Because otherwise, we're knowingly sitting here allowing those e-bikes essentially, right? I mean, that's what's happening if we're turning our shoulder to it and not addressing it.
Yeah, I think probably sooner rather than later, maybe we send this back to PTRC and give another shot at it.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly defer to City Council for direction on timing, but taking it to PTRC would obviously be my recommended first step and revisiting it with them.
Just as context, I do know that PTRC in the past has been a pretty strong advocate for keeping the prohibition on e-bikes. So just as context, that may change. I don't know if they've gotten all of this update as well. But just for council's context.
Yeah, my guess is if they saw this green, yellow, and red diagram here, they might change their mind.
Councilor Brown?
I'm not so sure, but I would, but, so I do have a couple questions, but, you know, to the point that I hear being made, there are a lot of laws that exist not because we actively enforce them, but so that when there is a problem, we have the means to address the issue. Whether it's dogs barking, you know, we don't have police driving around listening for barking dogs. But we do have noise ordinances, and if a neighbor calls and a dog is a problem, they have a mechanism to go speak to that person, right? So I do think it's possible for the e-bike prohibition to be useful, even if we know that the vast majority of people aren't following it. Ultimately, if there were some sort of altercation or, you know, encounter, and, you know, people were using that e-bike inappropriately, that would give people the means to do something about it, our police or whatever. So I hear you. I think that, you know, I think there's potentially still some advantage to it. I also think that not exactly from Greenwood Village, but from a lot of standpoint along this 77 miles, we have some other things that make us unique along the Highline Canal as well. And I predominantly think of the presence of horses. I know that they are present in Greenwood Village, and I know perhaps even further down towards Waterton Canyon, but you know, so that makes our section of the trail a little bit different as well. And so I don't think that we should just base our decisions on what's best for our community on what everybody else is doing. That being said, I also agree that the issue is speeding. I mean, that's really the issue. is it the case that more people are able to speed because they're using an e-bike? And if they were pedaling under their own power, they might be going less than 15 miles an hour? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows if that's true or not. But if it is the case that it helps keep people more in the range of the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, then that would be worth considering as well. I guess one question I have is, and I suspect it varies, but is there an audible difference? They're all pretty quiet now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, especially on the High Line, the sound of the tires is what you're going to hear
Yeah.
rather than there's like a very small whine from some of them, but it's a little like if you've ever had a Tesla sneak up behind you in a parking lot while you're walking and you turn around and there's a car there. They're basically inaudible, especially on the High Line where it's crusher fines.
And I thought it was interesting about a year ago, right after we considered this and heard this issue, almost the very next day, I started seeing those bike share bikes just randomly abandoned on the side of the road, and I'd never really seen that before. And then actually, I haven't really seen it a whole lot. I mean, I guess it's winter, but I'm wondering if, because most of those are e-bikes as well, and I'm wondering if, that is a contributing factor that we would need to consider, either better or worse, because just randomly leaving bikes in people's yards and is not okay, in my opinion. That's kind of how those services are designed to work, but that doesn't really work very well here in our community. And so I think by having e-bikes not allowed on our trails, maybe it makes it worse because people just abandon them at the entrance, or maybe it makes it better because they know they can't bring those bikes here anyway. I don't know. And then just a side comment about those offset gates. I'm always reminded of our equestrian community. I am not an equestrian myself, but I've lived in Cherry Hills long enough and have served on council long enough that my mind always goes to that. And I would want to make sure that you can get through there on a horse, which is much bigger than a bike. So anyway, that's it.
Katie, I think you raised a point. Do we see any scooters on our trails? Because Denver, it's a
Oh my gosh,
major
it's
issue.
terrible. It's a menace.
And they ban, like you talk about banning, they ban them wherever they do. Do we see those on our trails?
Not in our experience, and I haven't gotten a call complaining about them specifically either.
And those would be covered under the same statute anyway, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But if we allowed e-bikes, would we be allowing those?
We would, no. So it would obviously be up to council, the specifics, but if we were to just adopt the same definitions under the state law, it would only apply to class 1 and 2 e-bikes. It wouldn't apply to scooters. I apologize.
Guess Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that I agree with all the comments that have gone before. Basically, we've sort of had a new technology thrust upon us with these e-bikes, and so we've kind of focused on that as the issue. But I think that long before the e-bikes, there were people speeding on the Highland Canal, and the real problem is I think more about safety. E-bikes, they're motorized, they'll go faster. Well, not necessarily. I mean, there are fast road bikes, as you pointed out. I think I'd encourage the PTRC folks to take a broader view and not limit the discussion to e-bike, but how do we make the trails safer in an enforceable way? I mean, I think having that red line where, all of a sudden you're supposed to get off your e-bike and walk it or whatever, I don't even know what the right solution is. It seems like we're kind of going against the grain and being a bit of a nuisance in a way. Where if we work on safety, I'd be just as happy getting the 10-speed, speeders that have no motors off, slowing down and as I would the e-bikes. So Yeah, I'd broaden the perspective.
I have a question for the chief, maybe. Maybe I missed it, but have we issued some citations for e-bikes, just either for, or speeding? E-bikes citations or speeding citations for a bicycle?
No. I think years and years ago, I talked to somebody who was a sergeant at the time. I think this is like the late 90s, there was a campaign and the police department did some radar up there, and that did not go well.
There was a backlash, is what you're
Yes,
saying?
sir. That's my understanding. I was not here. I think in 97 I was a baby sergeant somewhere else. So, but again, I think that a lot of that would have to do with really education, how you do signs, what you ask people to do. And there's ways to get officers up there and ways to educate people and to be involved. It's just not, you can't do it 100% of your time, obviously.
Short of citations or tickets, have there been instances where our officers have stopped people?
Yes, I can tell you that.
What were some of those circumstances about? Caused them to stop something?
Actually, I think a couple of officers, when they've been riding bikes, have had other bicycles pass them. And so you estimate the speed as you would do estimating speed as a car, and literally pulled somebody over. I mean, our bicycles I can't even, I think of the light on top of a helmet. I'm sorry, but literally trying to pull them over, and then it's just an education, telling them this is what the speed limit is, please be careful. I know of a couple of instances where that's happened.
I know it's always a challenge to staffing and everything. Would it help to have an addition, now that the Highline Canal is getting so much more use, we anticipate more and more, would it help to have an additional FTE in the police department, simply to sign to the Highline Canal and put on a bicycle? Have you considered that, or is that?
So I have 2 meetings left with you, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes. If you're going to ask a chief of police, are you going to give the police department another FT? I'm going to say yes. But I think there's probably another way to look at that with regard to parks and how we patrol parks, and what does that look like for a potential part-time employment or things like that. So I think there's ways to look at how to put somebody up there on a more common, for somebody to see someone. But I don't know if that is a sworn police officer, because no matter who you put up there, if there's an emergency call for service or there's no one available and they have to clear for a call, because of priority, they're going to leave the canal. Mm-hmm. So, maybe that looks like something else with regard to parks employees or park rangers. I think there's a lot of avenues to at least take a look at.
Something short of a full-time police officer. Let me ask a question this a little differently. If council was to authorize another full-time FTE, would you assign them to the Highline Canal, or would you have some other place that you'd rather have them in your department?
So, no, and that's okay. And this isn't hard. I mean, this is a great discussion, but based on the telephone calls that we take in, if you tell me you're going to give me somebody and I'm going to assign them, it would be to a traffic unit. It would absolutely be to traffic. Those are the calls that come in more than the Highland. Of course, you deal with seasonal things, right? There's not a lot of bicyclists that like to ride when it's super cold or even super hot, and definitely not when it's raining or snowing. You just have a core group that will do that, versus I will get, or the commander, I don't speak for myself here, when we get calls for service, it has to do with people are speeding on my street, chief. They're not obeying the traffic laws.
I might just jump in there as well. If we were in that circumstance and the chief were to request that person be on the Highline full-time, I would probably request additional information, just because I know that we have had no accidents on the Highline. There's been no injuries. It doesn't, the facts don't really support that kind of thing. So would I say no, never, no. I would listen, but we would need some further justification. And I think that, frankly, helping prevent crime, having a presence on our streets, responding to calls, whether that's traffic or theft or whatever it might be, in my mind, based on the facts, represents a bigger priority for the community based on the needs.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Appreciate that. Any other questions?
I have one more, I guess, question, comment. I think it'd be interesting. I know it's not necessarily absolutely relevant to how things work here in our village with regards to equestrians, and we have other things going on here than some of the other components throughout the 71 miles. Have we heard at all any updates from Harriet or the Conservancy as far as what's happening in the other segments? How are they addressing it? Are they finding it that it's a problem on the e-bikes in those green sections throughout the trail?
The Conservancy hasn't taken a specific position one way or the other. I've been in contact with Suzanne Moore in Greenwood, my counterpart in Greenwood Village, and they haven't seen, an increase in issues or anything like that since they've made the switch. And from our discussions working together with other jurisdictions along the High Line on all the High Line issues, speeding and trail etiquette are really the big issues that everyone's dealing with, and really how people are treating each other on the trail, but not specific to e-bikes.
When we had the first conversation a year ago, Harriet submitted a letter, and I'm pretty sure it was on behalf of the Highline Canal Conservancy, in support of allowing e-bikes. So I do remember that.
And I kind of remember that, but I'm just curious now, it's been a year. I'm wondering if there's any data there, find out from her whether she thinks that's still a good idea or if they're having trouble on the canal in different sections, or be a nice data point for us to have.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I know I've spoken with her, and I know that her view is they like uniformity across this little red dot in the middle is not what they prefer. But on the other hand, they appreciate that it's our jurisdiction too. So, but
The reality is, as the population ages, e-bikes are not going away. And they're 50% of sales right now and climbing. And so we have to deal with them. It's just the nature of the beast.
I think we should appoint Mike to be the head of the park patrol.
the ranger, Mike the ranger.
Park patrol, volunteer park patrol.
Well, I don't know if there are any other questions. I think you got a direction from council that sooner rather than later raising it back again with PTRC about this issue and the views, kind of get a flavor of the views of council and perspective of our perspective on it. So if that helps, is that good? Anything else for us?
Not from me, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. We don't have anything else on the agenda until 6:30. We need to wait. We can't start our meeting until 6:30. So we'll stand in recess and we'll come back here at 6:30. That makes you vice president. The mayor of vice. Okay, I have 6:30. I'll call to order this regular meeting of the Cherry Hills Village City Council. It's Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. First, we'll have a roll call, please.
Counselor Safavi is absent. Counselor Wheel?
Happy to be here.
Counselor Brown?
Here?
Counselor Gallagher?
Here.
Counselor Sheldon?
Here.
Counselor Blum?
Here.
So I'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Next item is audience participation period, 5 minutes for the audience to speak. We can have the sign-up sheet. Thank you. Oh, they're on the bottom, okay. This is 5 minutes to speak, and it's not a question and answer, it's just to speak. You're allowed 5 minutes to speak to any topic you wish. And first we have Laura Chrisman to speak about e-bikes. Mayor Chrisman, welcome, and
Okay, thank you. I wasn't really planning on coming until I saw e-bikes on the study session. So I'd like to address a few issues and a couple things that you saw tonight so that perhaps it will assist in your direction to Parks and Trails. The only trail you showed was the High Line. We are a city of trails. We have wonderful trails. We have a community that uses them. Yes, we have bikes on them, but these are really more mountain bikes. To some extent, speed is limited with that, or at least you have to be in really good shape on these trails to go very fast. I have not, to date, experienced any problem with mountain bikers, but their speed is limited. An e-mountain bike is not limited because you don't have to work to do it. So I would ask that you think about whether we want e-bikes all over the village, or are we just talking about the Highline Canal? And also, getting by people. The second is, if we're going to talk about enforcement, then let's talk about enforcement. The sign, Emily, with all due respect, the sign you showed with the "Welcome to Cherry Hills Village" and the speed limit, no e-bikes, is not what you see coming out of Denver. There is a speed limit sign. It's about the size of my cell phone, and it's at the bottom of the "Welcome to Cherry Hills" sign. Because when you're riding a bike, that is exactly where you're going to look for the speed limit. The next place you see a speed limit is in, because I went and looked today, is in Three Pond Park. There's a mess of signs there, and beneath the dog poop container is this little tiny sign that says "No e-bikes," and a little tiny sign at the bottom, so it's way down here, the speed limit. Again, where you will see it. Now, clearly we know that doesn't work, because in the parking for Three Pond Park, which is 2 feet away, are 3 signs this big, 6 feet apart, that tell people to to lock their car and keep their valuables in the car. 3 of them, 3 giant, not giant, but decent signs at eye level. We know that people need significant signage if they're going to do anything. I know that the officer who I spoke to this summer told me that the reason that he has not been giving citations is because nobody can see the speed limit signs. And he is not comfortable asking people to, and also as to e-bikes, and he said he had actually tracked down a couple e-bikes, because he was on an e-bike as well. And he said that he gave him a citation because they went, I didn't know e-bikes were prohibited. The signs, it's this big, honestly. It's this big, and it's usually down low or where you can't see it. So if we're going to enforce something, we need to make sure that everybody knows. I cannot find anything that says what the priority is. Equestrians, pedestrians, bikes. I can't find that anywhere on the trail. And I know this now because Linda McNeve and I were going across the bridge when a couple bikes, not e-bikes, came up behind us. And they did let us know they were there because they said, get off the bridge. And I turned around, because you guys know me, and I said, pedestrians have the right of way. And they said, no, you don't. And we continued to walk across the bridge. We got off. And then to your etiquette thing, they said, and the word starts with an F and ends with an ing, effing old people. Now, that's not against the law, but it does talk about etiquette. So trying to enforce etiquette is not going to work in this day and age. We need enforceable laws if we're going to do this, and we have to enforce them. And I understand that the police maybe have bigger issues, and they have not gotten complaints. But look at the complaints that the master planning people have gotten in the master plan. There's a lot of complaints. It's a huge issue, and it's something we need to look at. I will mention very briefly that the mounted police, the Arapahoe County deputies, are willing to patrol at no cost to the village the Highline Canal and our trails if you want them to. They have asked me now 3 times, does the village want us to? I have said, apparently not at this time, but maybe it would be a good thing to do come spring to see if it would be effective. But you have to give them enforcement tools, and if we have no enforcement tools, etiquette isn't going to cut it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chrisman. Next up, we have Jennifer Diffendahl to speak about ARPA funds. Welcome.
Thank you. This thing bend. All right. Jen Diffendahl, 5701 East Stanford Drive. Mayor Stewart, councilors, City Manager Kramer, staff, thank you so much for being here tonight. Sometimes standing here at the microphone, we all can forget and take for granted that our elected residents are volunteers, and that all of you put a lot of thought and energy into these meetings and decisions. I sincerely thank you for that. As a former volunteer in our public safety building, I know you do it out of the kindness of your hearts. We all share a deep love and commitment to our community. Each of us here tonight have our own passions that we champion. I believe that our diversity in our passions and expertise is always beneficial to our community. Sometimes we agree and other times we don't, but my hope is we can hear each other with respect. Tonight, council is voting on supplemental appropriations for the city's thank you bonuses for our 46 full-time employees. I want you to know that I truly do understand that citizens do not usually comment on how funds are allocated, and that is in the sole discretion and purview of our city manager. However, I believe this to be a special exception. My intention is not to step out of bounds or anger you with my plea, but to simply advocate for what should be our top priority in our recovery process, which is our first responders. Among all of our hardworking employees who justly deserve a bonus, only our police force were first responders. I believe they bore the brunt of the burden for our community during the pandemic. If these bonuses were being paid out by a surplus in one of our regular funds, as Councilor Blum has kindly looked for and suggested, I wouldn't be up here tonight. But these funds are from a grant from the American Rescue Plan Act, and they are meant to be COVID rescue and relief funds. Their sole intent is to aid our city's recovery from the pandemic. It's about what our cities value and what we value and our priorities. ARPA funds are the once-in-a-lifetime way we can effect a payout for our first responders. It is not the last money we will ever get for infrastructure projects. We should prioritize the premium pay category for our first responders. They need to know that as a community, we see them and we see their disproportionate sacrifices they made during this difficult time. Since 2018, I've spent approximately over 600 hours with our first responders. Half of these hours were before the pandemic and half were during the pandemic, and it has been the unexpected honor of a lifetime. I have had the joy and privilege to get to know each of our officers and personnel, and I can't thank Chief Tovray and Commander Weathers enough. Our community prioritizes safety and law enforcement. When the world shut down and went remote, our first responders did not. When families were concerned about limiting exposure to COVID for members of their families, our first responders could not. They were needed to continue and closely interface to protect and serve this community. They served us without regard to the known and unknown risks that could affect them and their families. I have seen firsthand the heartbreaking decisions Chief Tovray and Commander Weathers have had to make to give our community 24/7 patrol. Most of those decisions meant calling people back into work who were overworked, overtired, and drained. Our first responders lost vacation days. Half of them contracted COVID, which subsequently caused massive staffing shortages. And as a team, they band together and sacrificed everything for the good of our community. When times are tough, our first responders' response has always and will always be to put their head down and work harder without complaint. Even though they served and continue to serve without complaint, we as a community should not take their extraordinary service for granted. We have a chance to pay them out with the ARPA premium pay category in 2021. COVID was again the leading cause of death among U.S. law enforcement, a 55% jump from 2020. They are more than deserving of this money, and it does not diminish from the service and efforts of our city employees. As a community, it's the right thing to do. First responders have made unimaginable sacrifices for our city. That is why I am asking for a special payout for them under the premium pay category for their heroism and an investment in the relief and recovery for our city from this pandemic. And I am asking to pay each officer and personnel of the PD $10,000, which is inclusive of the $4,000 being given to all employees, $15,000 for Commander Weathers, and $25,000, the max pay for the sacrificial leadership of Chief Tovray. They have more than earned it, and in my opinion, it's the right thing to do. I am asking that the first big payout to be paid out to our first responders tonight. They have never once hesitated to come to our aid for our families, and we should not hesitate to come to theirs. They earned it, and they've deserved it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Divendahl, and thank you for your support of the police department and all of your volunteer work, too, particularly. Next, any other comments? We have, next up is Eileen Weiss, and you're welcome to add to it or say me too, as you wish.
Hi, this is Eileen Weiss from 3711 South Albion Street, resident since 1976. And so I come out when I really feel a cause is happening that I'd like to comment on. I totally agree with Jen's proposal for upping the amount. if you're going to say thank you, do it with a big hug. Don't be stingy. I can give you little vignettes of my stingy uncle that I had to go back and put more on the table as a tip to make sure it was right with the world. And with Jen, I understand that you have been given this funds from the ARPA, and that it is, what is the amount? 1.67 million, and as you have designated it now, it's 200,000, and she is recommending that you go for 443,000 with a remainder of 1.23 million. Now, you are the stewards of this federal money, and it has been earmarked for first responders. So you get to be Santa Claus tonight and other nights with this specific money and not feel like it's burning a hole in any of your pockets, and just do it. What else can I say? It's a wealthy community, and I think we'll all be proud if we can go and do something so worthy. And that's it, and thank you. Have
Thank you.
big hearts.
Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate your comments very much and your support for the police department. Next, is it Kirsten or Kristen? I'm sorry, I can't read it. Youngblood?
Hi, yes, I'm Kristen Youngdahl, and I live on South Bel Air Circle. Just wanted to echo the two lovely ladies that came up here and talked about it. We have children that go to CHVE, and there's officers there every day. Doesn't matter what the weather is, doesn't matter about COVID, and so we want to give them their support. So really want to up the ante. So fully in support of what the plan that Jennifer laid out. Thank you.
Thank you for coming too. Appreciate your time and coming in your thoughts. Always. You're always welcome. Anybody else wish to speak that hasn't signed up? Well, I know there's one more. Is there another? Go ahead. You're welcome to come forward. Please state your name and give your address.
Hey, yeah, my name's Rachel Melamus, 17 Sandy Lake.
Oh, Rachel, welcome.
I've actually been a member of this community since I was 8 years old. And I can tell you numerous times the police department has been there for me and my family. So yes, I just want to echo everything that everyone has said before me and just give my thanks and appreciation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for coming. Appreciate it. And finally, Mr. Griffin, give you the final word.
This is a lovely building that you guys built. Mark Griffin, 3236 Cherry Ridge Road. Mr. Mayor, City Council, staff, City Manager, Chief of Police Tovray. I'm the president and chairman of the board of the Cherry Hills Village Police Foundation. And in case you didn't know, I handed out some donation cards to you tonight. I'm an unapologetic advocate for the Cherry Hills Village first responders, AKA our fabulous police department. The City of Cherry Hills Village recently received a $1.67 million grant of public funds from the federal government, AKA ARPA. It's the responsibility of City Council to decide how to allocate those public funds. However, since these funds came from the public, I think it's prudent that the council consider public input as to how these funds are allocated. One of the purposes of the grant is to compensate first responders for their sacrifices during the COVID pandemic, which we've heard this evening. Our officers have sacrificed a great deal during this period of time, with 50% of them getting COVID and the others having to come for second and third shifts. It was quite a challenge. We've seen from the public tonight that they want special dispensation to be given to these people. Other communities have reportedly given great sums, much greater than we've allocated. I think we need to investigate that and see what that looks like. I think our first responders have had greater challenges because of our relative small size. You've got the city of Aurora over here with hundreds of police officers, and we have, how many, Chief? 23 full-time police? I would suggest that council consider giving these first responders the $10,000 bonus that Ms. Devendall requested, maybe even more. I would also like to thank council for their service during this difficult time, and please consider carefully the public input, how their money should be spent to reward our first responders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin, for coming tonight and also for your service on the foundation. We appreciate it very much. The whole village appreciates it. Thank you. Is there anyone else? I take it not. If not, I'll close the public audience participation period and look for anybody from city boards and commissions. I take it no one's here to speak for them. Move on to the next agenda item, which is item 6, approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the minutes from February 1st are approved. Unfinished business, this is item 8, which is Council Bill 6, Series 2022, approving a supplemental appropriation in the American Rescue Plan Act Fund for a one-time discretionary employee bonus. This is a second and final reading, and we're going to be led by Director Sager or City Manager Kramer first. Okay, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This is the second reading for the council bill authorizing a one-time discretionary bonus of $4,000 to 46 current city employees, along with other city pay taxes and benefits to go along with that amount. There have been no changes to the council bill from the first reading. If approved on second reading, the supplemental appropriations will be in the total amount of $201,000, $201,950.84. And it will be paid to the 46 employees the week of March 2nd, if approved on second reading. As a reminder, in order to receive the bonus, employees must be current, a current employee, still employed by the city, and also employed by the city prior to December 31st, 2021. Again, the intent of this is really to function as a thank you and a gratitude. So we obviously want to make sure that folks have been here during that time for us to be able to say thank you. The funding source for these bonuses comes from the American Rescue Plan Act. And as we discussed last time, the remainder of that funding, council has really yet to go through the process of identifying alternatives, analyzing alternatives. There's always the opportunity to consider additional bonuses at that time as well. But we are not yet to the place where we have begun that process, as we are still awaiting final guidance from a variety of sources. We do have until the end of 2024 to earmark said funds, and then an additional 2 years to spend those funds. I just want to say, obviously everyone knows the past 22 months has been extremely challenging. It's been challenging for everyone, including our own employees. Everybody's had different impacts between caring for family members who have been sick or caring for themselves as they've been sick, dealing with really haphazard child care issues, whether it's schools working remotely or younger kids' daycares closing altogether. Difficult work conditions. Employees have had to, ranging from here at City Hall, the police officers, our public works folks, everybody has really been put in a lot of difficult situations. And really, to no one's surprise, hopefully to no one's surprise, our employees have shown through and have risen to the challenge. And they were able to demonstrate their commitment to the village, performing these tasks with these remarkable conditions at an extremely high level. It's one thing to make it through and to be able to do your job. It's another to do it at such a high level that our employees have done over the last 22 months. And so for that, I think this bonus represents a tremendous thank you to all of them for sticking with the village. This bonus is not intended to recognize individual contributions or hardships on an individual basis, an individual employee basis, or a group basis. This is a collective thank you on behalf of the city, really to recognize sticking with us through this whole time. So I am recommending that City Council adopt the second reading of the council bill, and staff is available to answer any questions you might have.
All right, any questions for staff? Councilor Blum?
Well, I'll just make a few comments. As everybody was aware that I was an advocate for paying additional sums to our people, basically looking at our surplus, and I want to really appreciate what Jessica and our city manager has done to find out, and with the changes in the ARPA regulations, to allow us to use public funds to do that, and not have to come out of our surplus that went into reserves. As everybody's aware, we do have several years to figure out and prioritize the funds as to how we're going to use them. There's a number of projects, obviously. Some of us are more in favor of certain things. Other of us have other ideas on that. I think Mark Griffin has made a good suggestion that in the interim, assuming we approve this tonight, go out and see where the other cities are doing and study and see what some of the other communities are doing that have used these funds. And then come back to us with basically a recommendation from staff. So again, I'm in favor of these adopting this council bill. And I do appreciate, and I think it's very important, we've gotten the input from people here tonight. And it's important, and it's important to thank them for the passion in which they've shown for promoting the staff and the police department. So I want to thank them, thank Mark for his suggestion, and those are my comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sheldon.
Yeah, taking what Councilor Blum said one step further, you know, you might suggest actually going on to seeking some more public input if this moves forward or gets shot down tonight. Maybe public input about what to do with the remainder of the ARPA funds if and when those funds get called on. If we've got another $1.4 million roughly left, I think it's important for us to prioritize. We've talked about that as council. And I think that the public input on that matter is important. To be clear, some of the other things that could be done with these funds, City Manager, includes items such as sewer upgrades, telecom, cellular service, undergrounding of utilities, things like that. Is that all? Would those all be eligible other infrastructure or infrastructure items?
At a high level, yes. There's obviously strings attached to all of these.
Absolutely.
But yes.
Okay. Thank you all for coming out tonight and giving us your thoughts on this. I appreciate it.
Councilor Gallagher.
I want to thank you for public comments and the support of our police department. We are all very proud of our police department and what they do in their mission to keep this community safe. I'm in favor of this bill. And I am also understanding our responsibility as council to make policy decisions. And we need to look at things just as Dan pointed out, sewer, cell service, things like undergrounding, and using these monies very well. So I think that is, we have till 2024 to make some decisions, further decisions. We have till 2026 to actually spend the funds. I think there's an opportunity, certainly, to come back, and if we want to reallocate more funds to our staff, we've got that time. But I think this bill is written well as it stands.
Thank you. Councilor Brown.
In regards to what's been said, I'll echo all of that, but I'd like to add a special welcome to the young ladies in the audience tonight. Thank you all for coming. I know a city council meeting isn't the most exciting part of your day, but it is an important part of how things get done, and maybe one day you'll find yourself called to do something service to your community as well. So thank you for being here, and it's good to see some familiar faces. But I agree. I think, obviously, we appreciate our police. We appreciate our staff. We could never pay anyone what they're worth. So it can't be a strict reflection of contribution because there just isn't enough money on the planet to pay people what they've contributed to this community. So hopefully, this is at least a step in the right direction to acknowledging how hard and the sacrifices that everyone has made. And as we further understand what is and is not allowed from these funds, I do think that we need to set out what the possibilities are. And I completely agree with former Councilor Griffin that we should get public input on that. They are public funds. These were not tax dollars that were paid directly to Cherry Hills Village, but they are tax dollars. And that carries a whole level of responsibility with it that I'm always very cognizant of. So thank you to everyone for your feedback, and I'll turn it over to Randy.
Councilor Wheel, please.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. Thank you very much for your comments. They were very much appreciated, and as well, Chris, you too. I think that running the city well is a team effort. I think that the team has performed in an incredible way in terms of resilience and adaptation with all of the fits and starts that COVID presented to us. And my hat is off to you for the great job you've done. I am also a believer in the master planning process. And through that process, we reach out to the community multiple times in multiple ways to ascertain what the priorities and what the will of the general population is. We're in the process of going through that master planning process right now. So I would encourage anybody, whether in this room or elsewhere, to jump in and do so, to participate. I think that will give us a much clearer view of priorities. I don't think we're in a good position to say, well, you know, sewers are more important than infrastructure for cell service. We need to get a much broader view of that from the population. So I look forward to that, and I think what Chris and the group have come up with is a great and meaningful thank you for the above and beyond that went over throughout these past couple of years. So I'm certainly supportive of what you do, what you're doing, what you're proposing, and looking forward to better input so that we can allocate the balance and other funds well. That's all I have.
Thank you. I'll echo that too. Thank you to the city manager for coming forward with an excellent kind of proposal and for the ARPA funds. And thank you to Jessica too for kind of figuring it out. Although, and so everybody knows here, this has happened all pretty quickly. The final rule only came down, it was only published in the Federal Register on January 29th. So, and it doesn't take effect until April 1st, even though we can go ahead and proceed with doing this. So this is all very, very new. And there's a lot of analysis to be done on the final rule and what it allows. The Colorado Municipal League, CML, is going to come out with more interpretation of it. I plan to write about this in my next mayor's report for the crier to outline some of what the final rule says. It is a big change from the interim rule. The interim rule had real restrictions on loss of revenue that have basically been done away with. So it really gives us a lot of flexibility. And a lot of that is really, we on CML took a position, and the National League of Cities were vocal in getting to the Treasury Department that we needed flexibility, and that their interim rule was too restrictive and didn't allow us what we needed to do. So we actually called members of Congress from Colorado. We wrote to the Treasury Department in comments encouraging them to give flexibility, and they listened to us, which is kind of nice. Usually the federal government doesn't listen to us very much, but sometimes when you get together, they do listen. And we have a lot of flexibility and now a lot of options. One I wanted to add to Dan's was right in the heart wheelhouse of this is stormwater. And that's one of the things that we've entered now into the Highline Canal Compact and undertaken obligations to do engineering and construction of stormwater improvements to the Highline Canal, which we were all wondering how that was going to be funded. That's one potential. I mean, and there are more as well, because we can basically use a lot of this money now for whatever we typically do for governmental services. So we have, it's really open. And I agree with the comments that have been made. This is now an open process. We ought to ask the public what they think are priorities. I also very much agree with Councilor Wheel saying we have a master plan. The master plan lays out what priorities are. Sewer is one of it that lays out. So is cellular service. I know that's a priority for everybody. So is stormwater. So, and so is undergrounding, but that's, probably a different issue. But I agree with that. I agree with the master planning process as a way of collecting the view and vision of our residents about what's most important and using that when we decide how the rest of these funds will be spent. That is correct. We have $800,000 in the bank now. We get another $800,000 in May, as I understand it, and there is no obligation, as you correctly said, to spend that money until December, until 2026. We have to earmark it by 2024, the end of the year 2024. So, but I do appreciate all the comments from people, and I welcome everybody who came, all the young ladies who came. I hope you make it a habit. We're happy to see you whenever you want to come in and visit. That said, is there any other comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Council Bill 6, Series 2022, a bill for an ordinance of the City of Cherry Hills Village, amending the 2022 budget and approving a supplemental appropriation in the American Rescue Plan Act Fund for one-time discretionary employee bonuses on second and final reading.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. And any other discussion? Any further discussion? Any comments? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call for this, please.
Counselor Wheel?
Yes.
Counselor Brown?
Yes?
Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Counselor Blum?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. We will now recess the regular meeting of the Cherry Hills Village City Council and call to order the meeting of the Cherry Hills Village Southmoor Circle and Hudson Parkway General Improvement District Board. So, Laura, if we could have a roll call of members, please.
Board Member Safavi is absent. Board Member Wheel?
Happy to be here.
Board Member Brown?
Here?
Chair Stewart?
Here.
Board Member Gallagher?
Here.
Board Member Sheldon?
Here.
Board Member Blum?
Yes.
It is, just for the record, I have 7:06. We have consent agenda item 12, approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. And that's all. There's no more new business, so we will adjourn at 7:07, I have, and reconvene to the meeting of the Cherry Hills Village City Council at 7:07. Reports, I have a brief report. As I just indicated, the Treasury Department issued its final rule on ARPA, which is really very interesting. It's actually 800 pages long, right? In the Federal Register, I think it takes up 400 pages or 500 pages. It's very detailed and very, very interesting reading. But I will be reporting on that in the next my next mayor's column in the Crier. On the 9th of February, we had the Mayor's Munch, Centennial hosted. We have Mayor Pico hosted us. We do have two new mayors, and again, from Littleton, Kyle Schlachter, and Inglewood, Othonio Sierra, and they were there as well. They're very young and active and interested and energetic young mayors, so it's an interesting change of the guard and different views on municipalities. Everybody, all the other mayors were there as well from Sheridan and Greenville Village. On the February 11th, I zoomed into the CML State House report that's talking about the legislative activity and CML's positions on pending legislation. And for our piece of legislation, the one that CML is pushing, that I've asked CML to pursue, which is requiring competitive bidding on undergrounding utilities, that is proceeding forward. We have discussions with Excel and discussions among stakeholders about the language that will be put into it before it goes to the sponsors, bill sponsors. So that's where that stands. And Excel had, we are on phone calls with Excel. They have some questions, and we'll see where that all comes out. But basically, we're at Senate negotiations now. We do have bill sponsors who are ready to proceed with the bill, and full support from CML for that bill. But the devil's in the details. Let's see, we have coming up this week is a CML legislative workshop. It's all day in person back in Denver, so I'll be attending that. It's an event. I think the governor usually comes and speaks, but it's just a discussion about current legislation and bills in the General Assembly and CML's position and information session. So that'll take Thursday. On Friday, the CML Policy Committee will meet by Zoom. That's usually about a 3-hour meeting to take positions on CML positions on pending legislation for the General Assembly. And that's my report. Councilor Blum.
No report.
No report.
No report.
No report.
No report.
Perfect. City manager.
I will I'll see if any directors have any reports.
I don't have a report, but I would just like to say thank you to City Council on behalf of staff for approving the supplemental appropriation. You know, after City Manager Kramer sent out the email advising staff of the bonus, I had several of them stop by my office to say thank you and ask that we express their appreciation. So on behalf of staff, thank you so much.
I do have a few things. You might remember it's been a while since we've heard an update regarding the I-25 Bellevue interchange project. We received an email just today that project is starting back up again. They amended the scope to the project, the funding partners, I should say, Denver, Arapahoe County, and Greenwood Village, amended the scope of the project for an additional 6 to 8 months to review one last alternative, the Diamond Plus. I believe we talked about that a little bit last time. So it will go through a more thorough engineering analysis. I suspect it'll be a little bit more thorough than what we did here last time looking at it on the screen. We will certainly participate in that. I can just tell you, we haven't seen the traffic numbers yet. We haven't seen the pedestrian or other modal numbers. But the reality is, will it have less likelihood of cut-through traffic impacts for Cherry Hills Village than the straight split diamond? Yes, it will. But will it have more cut-through opportunities than the spooey? Yeah, it would have more impact from that perspective. That's going to be the short of it from our perspective from this community. We will continue to participate in that vigilantly to ensure that our perspectives are known.
Is it less or more than the do nothing option?
I don't know the answer to that. I would suspect it probably would slightly increase the odds than the do nothing option. Increase the odds of cut through traffic to Cherry Hills Village, specifically Quincy. That would be my suspicion. But we'll get the full engineering analysis. The engineering firm, I'm sure, has loved how this has proceeded.
Are they going to come in here and present to us, or are you going to be presenting back to us?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I just got the email literally like at 2:00. So that's a good question. They have offered to in the past. So I think it would make all the sense in the world. I think it would make a sense for our residents to hear, or at least be able to go watch the video to hear the presentation directly.
I think so. You guys, everyone knows kind of my position on this. I think we need to fight, and I think our residents need to fight, and we could see a big jump in cut-through traffic in this village if we get the wrong outcome here.
I just want to say that I should have taken the cue when this started. I could have gone and gotten a degree in traffic
by the
engineering.
time.
But since this process has been
And
underway,
been employed by then, yes. Yeah.
I'm in the wrong field.
Just did want to report to City Council that we did have our MOU required kickoff meeting with the Land Preserve for the annual plan process. It went very well. I think we have a good mutual understanding of the steps needed to be able to, for them to be able to submit their draft annual plan this summer. It really feels like momentum is headed in a positive direction there as well. Further, we were able to have a communication meeting with some of the neighbors directly around Quincy Farm. The Land Preserve was able to join us for that, and I think that was really the first time some of the neighbors have had a chance to have a face-to-face with the Land Preserve, and the Land Preserve has offered to set up another meeting with them, including to invite Dr. Scrimstead to that follow-up meeting. And so, I think there's still real concerns from the neighbors, concerns that you all have heard many times before. I don't think that just magically went away. However, I do think that having an opportunity to get that FaceTime is a good step in the right direction, and there was, I think, a little bit more of an understanding. So from that perspective, I would call that progress. We did talk tonight a little bit about the master plan process. I did want to let council know that a master plan town hall meeting has been set for March 7th. I don't know if that's at 5 or 5:30. I know that Paul was working with our consultants and the P&Z members on that. So pardon the fact that I don't have that starting time, but if you did want to block that out on your calendars, we got the signs that are going to go in the in the right of way and all those kinds of things. We got those in just the mail today, so you're going to start seeing a lot more advertising and sort of a media blitz on getting folks to that town hall meeting. And I am, that's it. That's the only report I had.
There's one thing you mentioned to me about an initiative of Arapahoe County on broadband. Is there anything more you can share about that, or?
Yeah, just recently, Arapahoe County has started a coalition for broadband. And I think that actually got started before the ARPA funds really got their final ruling. But it really is a group that's intending to have a regional look at broadband and fiber in an effort for economies of scale, but also to make sure that there's network efficiencies. So we've reached out to that coalition, and to my knowledge, Jay, I don't think there's been any sort of formal action or any sort of road shows where they're out there talking about it quite yet. I think they're still in the formulation stage. Once it gets going.
Do we know if cellular is within their, and 5G is within their ambit, or are they talking about hardline fibers?
I think it's more like the Centennial approach, whereby they spent their time and resources on getting fiber in the ground. They're reducing overhead and costs for cellular companies to be able to then make it much easier for their entry into providing more lines. So I don't think that they are expressly going to be building towers, for example. They're just going to be putting in the backbone.
Thank you very much. Any other thoughts or comments? If not, I'll... Actually, we had an update on Friday on that, so yeah. Thank you for the update, by the way, Jay. Appreciate it. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Without objection. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for coming.
Nothing